Good morning, everybody. Welcome again to New Life Church, whether it be in person or online. We're glad you're here. We're glad that we can get the word of the Lord out to you today. And we last week were in the book of Mark. We had been in the book of Mark for quite a while. We'll still be going back to the book of Mark. But one of the things that we talked about in the last passage was when Jesus held the denarius and asked whose image was on it, and people said Caesar's, and Jesus said, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God," which means that we are bearing the image of God in us. We have the image of God in us. We're created in the image of God, and that's where we get our worth and our value. And I really felt like we need to spend a little bit more time in that thought for a minute. So I briefly mentioned Genesis 1 at the time, and I want to talk about that for a minute. Genesis 1 verses 26 through 27. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. So why do I feel like we need to stick in that passage or in that thought about the image of God for a minute? Well, I'll tell you why. Glad you asked. I'll tell you why. Because, okay, that's better. I had to kick off the shoes. Feel much better, more comfortable. But we were created in the image of God. And now, unless you've been living under a rock, you have seen a whole lot of stuff happening in this world. I use stuff. There's a whole lot of other words you could probably use for it, but a whole lot of problems happening right now. We've seen, I thought this COVID stuff was causing division, and it was polarized views and opinions of things. And then George Floyd happened. We saw a man get murdered. And I say a man. That's one of the things that I want to point out. We saw a man get murdered. And this is a man that was created in the image of God. So this should upset us. But we see race wars, we see people fighting, talking back and forth about, well, why do they do this, why do they do that, we do this, we that, everything like that. And it's making me crazy. And I know that it's making God crazy. Well, not crazy, but it's upsetting him. We are the church. We are called to be a source of healing in this country, in this world. And that's why I want to talk about that, because it said he created them in his image. There were only two. So everybody that was created after Adam and Eve, everybody that was born after Adam and Eve, bears the image of God. It doesn't matter what color skin they have. It doesn't matter what kind of accent they have. It doesn't matter if they have hair, if they don't have hair, if it's curly, if it's straight, whatever it is. Everyone is in the image of God. We bear the image of God. That is where we get our worth. That's where we get our value. Is in the image of God. And we need, as a people, to recognize that, to embrace that, and to embrace people of all races. We've all been created in the image of God. And so, what is this image of God? It's difficult to define, really. Honestly, scholars and theologians have been talking about this and arguing and everything for millions, well, not millions, I don't think we've been around that long, but hundreds, thousands of years trying to determine what the image of God is. I believe that bearing the image of God means that, for one, we have a soul. We have cognitive abilities, reasoning. We're able to discern right and wrong. We have an understanding. We have the ability to love. We have the ability to experience every emotion there is. We have a full range of emotions. because we bear the image of God. All humans, no matter the color, bear the image of God, and that's where we get our value and our worth. We love the concept of I bear the image of God. Oh yeah, Jimmy talked last week about Ephesians 2:10. We're God's masterpiece. I'm God's masterpiece. But we don't always think that way and read that into the person next to us, or the person that lives in the background, or the person that has darker skin than we do. My question is, how are we treating those that are created in the image of God? Because if we reject people that are created in the image of God, we are rejecting God. And I know you can say, well, I don't reject anybody. I don't, you know what? I thought I had it pretty well together. But, and I've been looking at social media and seeing things that have been happening, watching the news, seeing all these things and the division, and it just gets more, and the gap gets further and further apart, where it's white versus black, or it's white versus brown, it's white versus it, and it's all these, color should not matter if you're created in the image of God. And I thought I had it pretty well together. I thought I was doing a good job. I had a good understanding of, what my brothers and sisters of color were going through. And just to give you a little brief glimpse of my story, I'm brown. In case you didn't realize it, I'm brown. And I get more brown in the summertime. I can walk past a closed window. If the sun's shining in, I get darker. Yep. And I grew up in a Swedish Baptist church on the south side of Chicago. I mean, well, one thing that I learned in the Swedish Baptist church was my love for coffee, because everything had coffee involved. But I was the dark kid in the Swedish Baptist church. And when we sang in Sunday school, I had the best Sunday school teacher, Sylvia Verway. We called her Saliva Spit. But she was the best. And when I was a little kid, because I was a brown kid in the church, when we sang Jesus Loves the Little Children, she had us singing red and yellow, black, brown, and white. Yes. They are precious in His sight. And it's so simple, such a simple little thing, but it's true. All colors, are precious in the sight of Jesus. But I never really felt like I fit in. I was the dark kid with a bunch of Swedes. My best friend was so white he was almost clear. And I never really felt like I belonged. And in Michigan, where my parents have a summer home, I was the dark kid on the beach. They could always point me out because I was the darkest one, among all these white kids. But I never really felt like I belonged. To white folk, I was too brown. To brown folk, I was too white. And growing up and in high school, I was fortunate. I went to a very diverse high school, and we didn't really have segregation by color in the school, because it was a fairly mixed area. And still, to white folk, I was a little too dark. To the brown folk, I was a little too light. And the only ones that actually embraced me, and my best friends most of the time in school, were black people. And then fast forward to September 11th. Well, oh wait, we gotta stop. When I was 30, I met my birth mother, and I found out a little bit more about who I was, where I came from, my background, my ethnicity, and I found out from someone why my birth certificate had ethnicity unknown. And they told me it was because back in 1965, being Mexican was as bad as being black. That was the quote. I'm not saying that. That's what they said. Being Mexican was as bad as being black. And they didn't want me to not get adopted because I was part Mexican. Then, like I said, fast forward to September 11th. September 11th rolled around, and, I'm not like, I don't look like your typical Mexican person. One of my bosses called me half can because I was a half Mexican, and and all the Mexican guys on the job called me half can. What's up, half can? But again, there was that separation. I wasn't white, I wasn't brown, I was a half can. And then September 11th rolled around, and I was on a job, and we saw it, we heard about it on the radio, then we watched on the news and saw the second plane hit, and I started getting some looks from people because I didn't like go around broadcasting I was Mexican or half Mexican, half Hungarian, which, by the way, I'm a hungry Mexican, I like to say. But I didn't broadcast what my ethnicity was because that didn't matter. I grew up not knowing what race I was, so I had to embrace them all, and I think that was healthy for me. But September 11th happened, and I was brown and I had a beard, and I started getting those side looks, those side glances. Is he a terrorist? And like, I had to turn my radio on to the Mexican radio station and roll down the windows and have the music blasting, just so that I could hopefully let people know that I'm Mexican. I'm not one of the people that is responsible for this kind of stuff, because it's not like I'm going to be rolling through a car bomb and going to be bombing Walmart or whatever it is. But that was what I felt like was going to happen. And then I moved to Tennessee. Cheryl and I moved to Tennessee. I went to college in Tennessee, and the first week we were there in Tennessee, we were at some fast food restaurant. I don't even remember what it was, but it was after the summertime, and I had been working outside in the summer all summer long, and I get really dark. I get dark. I had some friends who are black that thought I was black because I was so dark. And we're sitting in a fast food place, and I noticed some looks. People give me that, or pretending like they're not really looking and looking out of the corner of their eyes, while they're talking, and they can't take their eyes off of me while they're having the conversation with somebody else. And as I walked out of there, I saw this person pull their purse closer to them on the table, because a person of color was walking by, and they hated the fact that I was there with a white girl. My wife is the most beautiful most beautiful woman who happens to be white and have the cutest freckles in the world. And not long after that, while we were still in Tennessee, we were going to Kroger for groceries. And as we were walking in, here I am, this really dark dude, walking in with this pretty white girl, and this elderly lady was in the parking lot and came like this far, or this close to hitting me in the parking lot, because I was this dark guy with a white girl. And I'd like to say I handled it well. Sorry, I didn't. I turned and just hit the car basically to let her know I was there, and hoping that she had the benefit of the doubt that maybe she didn't see me. I blended in with the blacktop or something. I don't know, but she jumped out of her car, took her keys out of the car, jumped out of the car, and followed us into the grocery store. She's yelling and making sure she knows that my kind are not welcome there. My kind don't belong there. And yelling, and she's telling how she's going to call the police. She told the cashier to call the police. I turned around, and then I took advantage of my color and that she was scared of me. And I said, "Lady, I suggest you walk away right now." And the cashier said, "Ma'am, I suggest you listen to him." And she left. But I got just a few glimpses, and there's more stories like that, of what it felt like to be judged based on the color of my skin. And so I get it, to some extent. So where do we start? Where do we start as, I don't know, maybe we got 14 or 15 white people sitting here. I'm, half white, half brown, but it's a bunch of white folks sitting here. Where do we start? Because, like I said, the church has to be responsible for the beginnings of change. We have to start by realizing Most of us, yes, we're sympathetic. We hear about George Floyd, we hear about some of these other situations, and we think that's sad. I feel bad for about a day. And then we move on. We go back to our lives, and it doesn't really have an effect on us. People of color do not have that luxury. People of color, this is hundreds of years built up emotions, the being oppressed. This is hundreds of years that they've experienced, and they've reached their breaking point. We need to understand that. We need to start praying to have eyes that see, ears that hear. We talked to Mark for quite a few times about the compassion of Jesus. Jesus saw somebody that was hurting. Jesus saw a blind person, and he had compassion on them. He felt for them, and he could not do anything. He had to. He was compelled to make a difference. He healed people. We need to be compelled to bring healing to this land. We need to pray for empathy, to feel what they feel. I know it's pretty much impossible to feel what they feel, but if we have conversations, we might start to feel and understand some of this stuff. Instead of just thinking about the people we see on TV or the stuff that the media wants you to believe that is trying to drive a wedge deeper between us, we need to have conversations with people of color. We need to pray for empathy. We need to pray for solidarity, to be united as one in a cause for justice for all. Unless we know and learn, we have to pray to unlearn. You catch that? We have to pray to unlearn. Like I said, I thought I knew so much about racial issues and things like that, and I've been studying this week, and we've had conversations with some pastors. I've called a friend of mine. We've had some conversations, and I needed to realize that everything that I thought I knew is out the window. I need to be willing to learn new things. Humble enough that, I know what I know is not enough. I need to know more. The more I learn, the more I realize I need to learn. We need humility. Does Black Lives Matter anger you? Does hearing Black Lives Matter anger you? Because it used to bother me. I used to think, what about all lives? All lives matter. We need to pray about this, though. We need to think about what that means. Because I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was telling me, yes, white lives matter, all lives matter. That's true. But they're not experiencing what we are experiencing right now in this moment. They have not been oppressed and been judged just because they were driving down the road and been pulled over. She said, we have to watch not only our rear view mirrors, y'all watch your rear view mirrors, but we have to watch our side view mirrors. We have to watch everything. A police car comes behind us, we get scared. I mean, yeah, I used to slow down and be worried about getting a ticket, but they get scared. Pastor Antonio in Detroit was telling the pastors in a Zoom meeting how he grew up in Detroit. His father worked for Chevrolet. He worked in the Corvette division. So Antonio, as a kid, would drive around in brand new Corvettes. There was more times that he was pulled over than not, because this young black man was in a car that he shouldn't have been in a neighborhood where he shouldn't have been in. Have any of you ever been pulled over for being in the neighborhood where somebody thinks you don't belong, you don't look like you belong in that neighborhood? I haven't, but my friends who are black have. We need to pray for humility. We need to ask God, just like Psalm 139, 23-24 says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there's any wicked ways in me. Lead me in the ways of the everlasting. We need to pray for healing for this world, that this world, it's not going to heal without God. The world, did you catch that? The world will not heal without God. We need to pray that this world comes back to their knees, falls on their knees. I've seen people, especially political people, trying to, make a statement and kneeling before a black crowd. We all need to kneel before our Father in heaven. So, what are some of the things I've heard and seen during this time? I've heard, and I've seen it on Facebook, some friends even said that on Facebook, if you don't do anything wrong, you don't have to worry about the police. They're not going to mess with you. People, that is a lie. Even back, I think it was probably 25, 30 years ago when I was working in St. Charles, a couple of my friends came back. Well, we had a lunch break. A couple of my friends came back late. I'm like, and my boss was like, "What happened? How come you guys are late?" Turns out that Mike and Dale were in the front seat while Randy and Joe, who are black people, were in the back seat. Police pulled them over, pulled the two black folk out of the back seat, started searching them, had them cuffed, and then went and asked the white guys in the front seat if everything was okay. Just for going out to lunch. We don't understand that. We don't grasp that. But the truth is, if you're a person of color, you do have to worry about that. That can happen. That's a real thing that happens. Next thing, and I actually had this conversation, well, I kind of didn't go into too much detail with them. It was a couple that was walking while Cheryl and I were walking the dog. Why do they, of course, we have to separate us versus them, because that's exactly what all these organizations want, to separate the us versus them. But why did they have to riot? I'm not saying rioting is right or wrong, but after hundreds of years of your voice not being heard, because all you're doing is speaking, you need to find a way to get somebody's attention. And just so you know, one of the most well-known turning points in our country was the same thing. White people did the same thing. You ever hear the Boston Tea Party? That was the first looting. They got fed up with taxation without representation from England, and they threw the property, the tea, overboard. Boston Tea Party wasn't just a bunch of people with their pinky up eating cucumber sandwiches and drinking tea. It was a rebellion. They had it. They couldn't take any more. I can't even begin to understand what my black brothers and sisters have been going through. But they need their voices to be heard after hundreds of years of oppression, of lynchings, of beatings, of whippings, of driving through neighborhoods and being pulled over because of the color of their skin. We have to have conversations. Morgan Freeman was speaking with Dan Rather several years ago, and Dan Rather asked, how do we get rid of racial tension? How do we get rid of racism? And he said, we have to start by stopping. Stop talking about it. I will not call you my white friend or a white man, and I ask that you not call me a black man. While that seems a little bit reductive, there's a point to that. I have friends that I talked to this week. I have friends who are black. They're not my black friends. I would never say, oh yeah, I was talking to my white friend Susan the other day. Usually Susan, my white friend Tiffany, or whatever it is, we don't clarify, or just kind of, when you say that, it's breaking them down. He's my friend, but he's black, but yeah, he's my friend. Is that okay? That's what we're really saying, whether we realize it or not. That's what we're saying. We are created in the image of God. All of us, all races, all colors. So I was talking to my friends yesterday who happened to be black. And I asked, What do you want people to hear? What do you want people to hear during this time? I reached out to some of them, and my friend Marquise said, throw race out the window. Focus on unity. I love that. Because race should not be an issue. Focus on unity. Antonio, the guy I was talking about before, which I never knew or realized, the term that he hates is when a white person says, "Oh, I'm colorblind. I don't see color." That's bogus. All of us see color. We need to see color and embrace the differences. Instead of letting it be a point of division, we need to embrace the differences. Get to know our brothers and sisters in Christ who are of a different color. And my friend Tasha, she's the boldest woman I know. And, I mean, she's been a friend since high school, and she will speak her mind. She will tell you the truth. And she's a God-fearing woman that, first of all, she told me, I just want us all to love each other. And then she went on, she said that we can't love the Lord while hatred is in our heart. People of color have been seeing for hundreds of years, or have been speaking for hundreds of years. Because I asked, what do you want the white congregation in Rochelle, Illinois to hear? And she said, you need to ask the questions, because we have been speaking for hundreds of years. Are you ready to start listening? We need to start hearing. And then she said, our kids are not our grandparents. It's a different generation. Her kids, who are in their 20s, have seen the oppression. They've seen how their grandparents were treated, and their grandparents were just like a good obedient servant, basically, and kept their mouth shut. Didn't say anything, didn't do anything, and then their parents started to speak up a little bit more. But the kids are seeing 3 generations and have heard the stories for generation after generation of their people being oppressed. And they're done. They're tired. They're ready to do something about it. And we need to meet them where they are. We need to strive to see through their eyes. There's no denying that the enemy is trying to divide and conquer. There's groups like Antifa that are they're baiting race relations. They're actually putting bricks and things on the route of people that are protesting. They're sending people in to stir up the crowd to get them to a point of rioting and looting. This happens. We must unite in the one who is able to bring healing. We're Foursquare Church. We are part of the International Church of the Foursquare Gospel. And we have a newly elected, actually he's now been inaugurated president of the Foursquare Church. Here's something he said. He said that we must call evil, evil. Racism, sorry, I got to bring it a little closer so I can read it a little better. Racism is evil, and it has no place in the family of God. We are more than just non-racist. We are actively anti-racism. I never even thought about it that way, but I want to be anti-racism. I don't want to just be on the sidelines not caring. I'm not saying we're going to start this big movement, but we need to start a small movement. Start with the movement in our hearts of loving and accepting and understanding people of color. The opposite of justice is oppression. The necks of our black brothers and sisters have been under the oppressive knee of white people for far too long, and we as a body need to take a stand and love people that are created in the image of God. Psalm 10:17 through 18 says, Lord, you have heard the desires of the humble. You will prepare their heart. You will cause your ear to hear, to do justice to the fatherless and the oppressed, that the man of earth may oppress no more. We must be the leading the charge to the return to God. Like I said, we will not have healing without God. God is the great healer. And we need to recognize that this is a spiritual battle. It's not just wrestling with flesh and blood. We need to stop that. The people of color are not your enemy, are not my enemy. The devil hates anyone that was created in the image of God. You, me, anyone. He hates anyone that was created in the image of God. So he will do everything possible to drive that wedge, to bring that fighting. So we take our focus off of God and onto the situation. We need to pray for the heart of God. I believe that the heart of God is breaking during this time. Luke 18, verse 7 says, Luke 18, verse 7 says, and will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones? His chosen ones are the ones created in his image. Red, yellow, black, brown, and white. All of those. Just side note. Will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? No is the answer to that. In case you're wondering, he will not keep putting them off. We need to be the ones, though, that are crying out for justice for all people, all races. And right now, yes, Black Lives Matter. You wouldn't tell your friend who, if their child died and they're sad, and they tell you, well, my child died. You wouldn't turn and say, all children matter. That's what they're hearing when you say all lives matter. Is it true? Yes, all lives do matter. But not all lives are experiencing what people of color are right now. If we have the heart of God, our hearts will break. So the question is, do you have the heart of God? Do you know him? If you don't, now is the time. Today is the day to know him and to ask God to make my heart like yours. We need to commit to ways of seeking unity between us and people of color. That which the enemy intended for evil, God can use it to bring glory to himself. And he can use it to bring people to him, reconciliation, so that they're rescued from separation, damnation of hell. I'm going to close with Revelation 5:9, because there's not going to be a section in heaven just for the white folk. There's not going to be a section in heaven just for the brown folk. There's not going to be a section in heaven that are black people only. We're all going to be together before the throne of God. So you might as well get used to it now. Revelation 5:9 says, and they sang a new song, saying, you are worthy, this is to the Lord, you are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, for you were slain and have redeemed us to God by your blood out of every tribe and every tongue and every nation. God, I know the conversation isn't over with just a half-hour message, but Lord, I pray that we start thinking new, start being renewed, and become your vessels for healing this land, for healing between all races, so that racism is a thing of the past. Lord, if it breaks your heart, we should be breaking. We should be broken. and not standing for it. We should be actively anti-racism. So Lord, help us to love those who are created in your image, because if we reject those created in your image, we are rejecting you. I pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.